Hello everyone, today we have another top 10 list video. And today it's about the topic of resistance. 10 things that show you're fighting against your own healing. Welcome to Soul Tapping. Today it's about the topic of resistance. Resistance, self-sabotage, it's all connected. So once again, it's about the topic, why am I still trapped in my depression? What could be the reason for that? And today it's about becoming aware if you're blocking your own healing. So what parts make up your resistance? What is it for you? I will now simply read these 10 points, and you can see which of them might apply to you. Point 1. How you notice that you are resisting your healing. You are in fight mode. Fight mode means you are determined to fight your depression to the bitter end. There's actually something very positive in that, namely a very, very strong will and a lot of strength. But at the moment, you are not using this will and strength constructively to truly leave your depression. Instead, you are wasting a lot of energy and your will on fighting it. And that will not work. I have talked about this in many videos. That's why I named my podcast, Overcoming Depression with Love. Because in my experience, this fight against depression simply doesn't work. It only works with love. So, if you give your very last strength to not wanting what is there, meaning that no matter what is inside you, what depressive feelings are within you, what depressive patterns you notice in yourself, if you constantly suppress it and don't want to have it, because it must not and cannot be. And there must be nothing depressive within me, and it can't be that I can't motivate myself, and I drink to deal with it, and things like that, or even take pills. For me, that also falls under fight mode, because you are fighting your depression because you believe it's about getting rid of symptoms to get your old life back. But that's not the case. That is not the purpose of depression. And the fight mode simply leads you into a blockage situation. And when you fight something that is currently there and within you, and what needs to be looked at now, if you fight it, you prolong your suffering. And you prevent the flow of healing from being able to pass through you. So the first point, very important, of resistance is fight mode. The second point, I've simply called it blockage. By that, I mean a kind of clinch mode. So, it comes from boxing. When two boxers are locked together, and neither gains the upper hand, and there's no step forward or backward. It's often like that. It's a feeling as if you're pressing the gas and the brake at the same time. That means you notice it in everyday life. For example, you want to accomplish a lot and plan to achieve a great deal today. For example, calling therapists to get an appointment or doing household chores or finally getting something done. And it's just so much. And the mountain is so high that you end up sitting there having done nothing. Then you sit at the end of the day and are totally frustrated because you didn't even accomplish a little bit. That's a typical everyday situation when you're stuck in this kind of blockage. And the question is, how do you deal with it, or what's behind it? I believe that when you're in a clinch, so to speak, the two that are in a clinch are your two parts fighting against each other. One of them is your inner driver, always saying, yes, come on, get going, and look, there's still more to do, and you should be doing this, and you should be doing that. So, yes, that's one part. And the other is like a stubborn inner child that stands there and says, nope, I'm not doing anything here. And if I'm put under pressure, then I definitely won't do anything. So it's like gas and brake. And if you let them fight against each other, it doesn't work. That means we have to approach it with love. Both parts desire your love and attention because both have an important message. One part wants you to rest and just do nothing for a while and not constantly be driven by the inner pusher. The other part also doesn't want you to completely let yourself go and lie down saying, "I'm not doing anything anymore," because both are extremes that won't lead you to healing. That means both parts need your love and appreciation. And try to love them both as if you have two children whom you love equally, where you have to separate two quarrelsome kids. Love is what matters, and that's why, at least in my experience, this is how you resolve such blockages. I called the third point resistance to solutions, or also resistance to advice. This means you have a very active, yes but person inside you. So that means you immediately dismiss any prospect of a solution. You can't help it. As soon as someone gives you any tip or offers you a prospect of a solution for any everyday situation that's difficult for you, you can't help it. You have to immediately dismiss it because immediately such a counterargument arises in you. Yes, that won't work. It won't work because, it won't work because. This, yes, but I've already made a separate video about that. It's very common in depression that one is resistant because they can't allow something to actually be resolved. So, there's a part of you, it's not all of you, but a part of you can't bear it and can't allow something to go smoothly and be resolved just like that. This can have various reasons. So, for example, of course, these well-intentioned pieces of advice, they are often blows in that sense, but not always. And you might be in such a complete blockade that you don't even consider thinking about it. Trying out something that outsiders advise you to do. Because these are often well-meant tips, and they also have a background, and they don't say it to annoy you or anything, but, I don't know, it's often like that. Situations where they come up with things like, you just need to exercise more. And inside you think, wow, they have absolutely no idea what depression means. And that just a little more exercise won't help me at all. So, the problem is that healing from depression is a 1,000-piece puzzle. I've described that many times before. That means if you're not willing to lay down even a single puzzle piece, then the puzzle won't be completed. And if someone from the outside, who has no idea about depression, tells you to just exercise more, then they're right. But he's only 1,000th right. That's the point. Please don't dismiss that right away. And say, yeah, he has no idea what the other 999 pieces need to look like. No, he doesn't. But he might know about that one piece because he might have experienced himself that exercise is good for reducing stress. So, it could help you too. So, that means that's a reason, or it's a way you might actually unconsciously block your own healing by being completely resistant to any advice from outside. And that's not good either. So just make sure you handle it a bit more consciously and maybe step out of your comfort zone and consider, could it be that the person has a point? Maybe they do have a bit of a point, and could I motivate myself to try it out? You'll probably find that if you really follow this advice and start exercising, you won't get healthy immediately. But please don't make the mistake of saying that was nonsense and it didn't help. Yes, it's exactly like the 1,000-piece puzzle. When you've placed one piece, you won't be able to see the whole picture. That's normal. But it will come eventually, and it only comes if you keep placing the pieces. Okay. Point 4 I called defensive attitude. This means that you actually get angry. This naturally goes hand in hand a bit. This means you actually get angry at people who want to help you, who offer you a helping hand. And you just immediately reject it on principle because you have this feeling that they all want something from you, or they want something from you, or they are putting you under a lot of pressure. So, you don't want to be put under pressure to finally have to heal. It happens so often that family members simply wish for you to get well because they want to see you happy. And maybe sometimes they overshoot the mark and apply a bit of pressure. So many also tell me that they feel pressure from the health insurance, that the doctor eventually says, "So, another sick note. Now we really need to start getting better." Sure, that also creates pressure. But be careful not to adopt a fundamentally defensive attitude by assuming that everyone just wants to pressure you when they give you advice, or when they want to see you healthy. It's simply about becoming a bit more aware so you don't fall into other extremes in such matters. So, if you are defensive, yes, if you immediately reject unsympathetic relatives, it kind of goes in that direction. And of course, that hurts. When well-intentioned help doesn't help you right away, it hurts. That means you might be in this defensive stance to avoid pain, in this defensive attitude. That point will come up shortly as well. But first, let's get to the point. 5. And that is the victim mentality. I've often talked about this as well. If you are in resistance and fighting against your own healing, it might be because you are still in the victim mentality. That means others are to blame for your depression. Others are to blame for your feelings. Others are to blame for your circumstances, your past, and the negative future you predict. Others are to blame, maybe even for your financial problems, the system, the politicians, the boss, the ex-boss, the partner, the ex-partner, the children, the parents, especially them. So, there are plenty of people to whom you can shift the blame. But that is something that blocks your healing flow. If you want your healing flow to get going again and you want to take the next steps, you can. Towards becoming happy, you must take responsibility. Even though I have already made my own videos about this, I want to mention it again here, because it is a total blockade if you are not willing to take personal responsibility and instead blame others. That doesn't help. Now comes point 6, which I just mentioned, namely pain avoidance. If you don't want to confront your painful issues, because it means overcoming a comfort zone, then that blocks your path to healing. There are always triggering situations where someone has said something. You feel hurt, you feel offended, or something else. Of course, that hurts. Trigger situations always hurt. And the obvious path that we all usually take, even if we are still relatively unaware, is to blame the other person for it. They said this and that, they offended me. That means you put yourself back in the victim position, and you also put yourself in an innocent position, because it feels so comfortingly good to be innocent in the situation, since the other person was the one who made the offensive remark. It may feel comforting at first, but it blocks your healing. That's the easier way. It's like taking pills, not wanting to feel pain. It doesn't help at all. You have to get out of your comfort zone, you have to face your pain. So, get out of the victim mentality, look at your pain body by taking the time to do so, by saying, "Okay, they said something stupid, that wasn't nice of them, but it doesn't help me at all. To talk myself as innocent and them as guilty doesn't help my healing journey. It only helps if I sit down and look at my part of the whole thing, namely my pain button, that the other person pressed, maybe even without wanting to or without realizing it. Most of the time, it's like that. The other person didn't mean to offend, they just said something and didn't know it was a pain point. Or whatever. Sit down, feel your pain, embrace yourself. The healing steps are always the same. I just want to point out that you should pay attention next time. If you feel somehow hurt or offended next time, then look at yourself. not at the other person who said it. You can heal your own feelings. And then maybe you can do something like I did recently in that key moment I shared with you. Watch the video again. Never feel hurt or offended again. That's exactly what it was about. That I make myself aware. Do I actually want to feel bad now? No. Do I want to feel hurt? Feel. Do I want to dwell on the fact that the other person was stupid? No. I end it here by saying stop. I choose differently. I want to feel good. That doesn't happen immediately. It depends how strong this pain point still is. If you still have a huge pain body with it, then you can't immediately say, I'm letting it go now. That only happens in the second step, depending on where you are. I just want to tell you, that's the second step you can still take. The first step is always to sit down and feel. I feel my pain. I am ready to accept that it hurts right now. And then I let it go again. That's how healing works. So, this is a comfort zone that you need to overcome so that you don't have as much pain anymore. Your healing flow gets going again. I called point 7, therapy sabotage. So, you're not only sabotaging yourself, but above all, you're sabotaging your therapy success. It might already start with you not being willing to look for a therapist because, as everyone knows, you won't get a therapy spot anyway. Of course, that's true to some extent. It's not unfounded. Still, it doesn't help you if you believe your "yeah but" voice, which immediately says, oh, you don't even need to try. You won't get a therapy spot anyway. I won't even bother to make the effort to call, so I'll just sit here alone. That's an attitude that doesn't help you and blocks your healing. Try it anyway. Practice firmly believing that it's possible to get a therapy spot, even for you. There are therapists, there are available therapists. But if you say from the start, I won't get it anyway, then you won't get it. So that's one way you block your therapy. Another way is, for example, if you withhold certain crucial information from your therapist, then it won't progress either. For example, out of shame. Let's say you have compulsive symptoms and do things that you would consider very strange or stupid. Most of the time, when people have compulsive symptoms, they are very, very critical of themselves and consider it completely stupid. And because they are so embarrassed to be so stupid, in their eyes, they don't dare to tell the therapist. But it would be very important to do so in order for it to be healed. This is just one example. There might be other things, maybe even alcohol, or something else that you're hiding from your therapist. By doing so, you're sabotaging your therapy success and your healing. So, as always, push past your comfort zone. Call yourself together and be open and honest with your therapist. And if you can't do that because you find them annoying, then find another one. Sometimes it's because of things like that you don't dare to say things openly and honestly. Then find another one. Consider that a possibility. Believe in your healing. That's the point. Or, another way, how you sabotage your therapy success is by not doing your homework. Therapists all work differently. Some assign homework, some don't. However, in my experience, I think you should do it regardless of whether you are assigned homework. Because we're not in school. We spent so many years learning in school. You learn for school. No. You do this homework in therapy for yourself, not for your therapist. So, for God's sake, do it. This means that you really work on yourself. During the week, even when you're not sitting with your therapist. In the sense that you are mindful with yourself, that you write your gratitude lists or whatever else. Your tools and techniques are that you tap, that you do these things. When there are trigger situations, you deal with them, you don't sweep everything under the rug again, only to dig it out again next Thursday when there's a therapy appointment by chance. This blocks your therapy success. So, please be very open and honest with yourself. And don't pay attention to your sabotage monster that constantly wants to tell you, we don't have time for tapping right now, we'll do it next week. That's just the sabotage monster trying to keep you from your healing. Be aware of that, and you'll be back in control, saying, hold on, sabotage monster, not happening. I'm doing it now and dealing with my issues, because only then will my healing flow. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that you have successes. Although you have them in therapy, you don't want to see them. Yes, so that you refuse to look at what has already improved. And, instead, you only focus on what is still not good. That's also a way to see that you are resisting your healing. So, make it conscious, make it conscious, make it conscious. And that's the first and most important step to dissolve these blockages. Point 8 is the negative focus. This is actually quite a normal, let's say, typically depressive phenomenon that we often find. But there's a difference whether you don't have anything positive. You can't see something positive where you don't want to see it. The latter has to do with resistance. That means, if you refuse to see the positive in your life, then it's not that you can't see it. Acknowledge. Then that's a form of resistance negative focus, so to speak. That means you always have something to complain about. You always have something to moan about, even though there are of course good things everywhere, but you don't want to see them. You simply don't want to see them. You have something to complain about, you have something to gripe about. When people give you the tip to just think positively, it makes you really aggressive. Because you're so resistant to seeing something positive. If you become aware that this might be a self-sabotage program, then you can start addressing it. Just as I mentioned earlier, be kind and appreciative with your sabotage parts. Embrace them. Thank them for their good intentions to protect you from whatever it may be. Only this way can you get out of this blockage situation. And then your healing flow will also get back on track. I used to experience that too. I had it very strongly, actually. When someone told me to think positively, it naturally didn't work right away. And I was so angry and I was so impatient and it hurt me so much because I thought, man, this just doesn't work. It just doesn't work. How am I supposed to? I can't do it. And the thoughts, the negative ones, they just come. I'm a poor victim. I was so deeply stuck in this way of thinking. And I learned this in a very slow, patient, appreciative process. And was able to let it go. And then I even used this trait for myself. I was able to use it positively, that I find every hair in the soup. I proofread books. You wouldn't believe it, I also studied German studies at some point in my life. I have 3 or 4 books where I did the editing, because it's easy for me to immediately find, even the smallest mistake. That also has positive qualities. And I was able to use it for that. So, I somehow turned it into a positive for myself. Hello, airplane. Once again with the airplane. The 9th point is called worldview, or also worldview. You compulsively cling to your worldview, which is most likely negative. That means you simply don't dare to allow that the world is actually different from what you've always thought in your depressive thinking has. That the world is actually easier, more beautiful, more positive. That you have many more opportunities available to you than you always thought. You also don't want to change your worldview. You sabotage any attempt for someone to challenge your negative, depressive worldview. Because you are so convinced that you are a failure. Or that, I don't know, that you are bad, that you are guilty, that you are a loser, that you can't achieve anything, and blah 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 blah. Yes, all that stuff. You want to hold on to it. And maybe now is the time for you to dare to challenge this self-image and worldview. And to start believing that you are much, much more beautiful, greater, more powerful, and wonderful than you have always thought. Because that is the truth. You didn't want to see it until now. You blocked it. You put on the dark glasses and kept them on to avoid seeing it. But that blocks your healing. And I find it interesting again. At this point, I want to note once more that I see a parallel to the collective situation we currently have, so to our collective depression, essentially, that we are experiencing right now. Because these trench wars. Corona has indeed drawn a trench through society. And both sides stubbornly cling to their worldview and are not willing to acknowledge, to recognize that maybe the other side is also right, just has a different perspective on it. And exactly that. I believe, to overcome this, each individual must start with themselves. So, I keep realizing this is what we need as a society. We must want to change our worldview. We must be willing to acknowledge that there are different perspectives on one and the same thing. And this doesn't just apply to Corona. Of course, there are different perspectives, depending on what focus one has. This also applies to war. This applies to everything in the world. There are always different perspectives. And I believe we would do well, if we want peace in the world, for everyone to start resolving their inner peace within themselves. The resistances, the inner struggles, these conflict situations. If we all start to resolve these internally and come to peace with how things are right now, I believe then we will no longer have war externally. So, that's essentially my contribution, if I may take a little detour. Because people sometimes ask me why I am still so positive and in such a good mood. And overall, even though everything is so terrible in the world. And then I always say, well, I stay out of it. I don't watch news about the Ukraine war because I keep my energy field clean. I don't let it drag me down. I don't want this battle happening inside me either. And I believe that's the only contribution I can make to create peace in the world. Because I can't change what's happening outside. I have no influence over what the politicians are doing. But I do have an influence on the Earth's energy field. Even if it's just a small one, I have it. And I do that by ensuring peace within myself. This also means staying out of all the war events. I haven't watched a single news broadcast about it. I don't want those images in my head. They don't do me any good. I have a responsibility to my clients to remain stable. And that's what I do. And I wish that everyone in the world would do this and dare to do this inner work. Yes, just a little digression. We have one more point. 10. Point 10. This is actually the most important one. Because now, at the end, we ask ourselves the question, why are we doing all this? Why do we sabotage and block our own healing? It is the greatest wish we have in life, to finally become healthy. So why are we like this? I've just picked out a possible reason, and that's my point. 10. And it's called secondary gains. Secondary gains mean that you have a psychological advantage from your depressive state that you don't want to give up, and this is on a completely unconscious level. No one would ever do that consciously. No one would ever say, I'd rather stay depressed and full otherwise. I might get less love and attention later. Otherwise, I might get less sympathy from others, so I'd rather stay depressed. No one does that. Yet, this happens on an unconscious level. And there can be all sorts of reasons for this. I think I'll make another top 10 list about it, simply because it's a very important and fascinating topic. I think I made a video at the very beginning, which was about 4 reasons why you remain trapped in your depression or something like that. One of those points was secondary gains. And I think I'll make a longer video about it. That means there are all sorts of things you don't want to lose. You're afraid of losing something valuable if you get better. And that's why you sabotage it. So that means there's a greater good. It's not because you're being masochistic, because you want to annoy yourself or anything like that, or because there's something wrong, sick, or anything else about you. Not at all. Rather, there is a greater good. Something that, for your subconscious, for your survival system, is even more important than being happy, realizing your potential, and being healthy. And that can, for example, be a mix of all sorts of things you might lose if you get better. Like attention and love, compassion, a forgiving attitude from those around you. This means, as long as you are sick, you can assume that no one would be so heartless as to put pressure on a sick person. This means you receive an attitude that is very forgiving. They forgive you for all sorts of things. So the fear of pressure is a huge thing, because that's also a reason why you became depressed, because you put pressure on yourself or allowed yourself to be pressured from the outside, allowed yourself to be overwhelmed. Brussels planes. Okay. So, a secondary gain could be that you don't feel pressure, no overwhelming demands from outside. Then there are things like that, which I have already talked about in another video. Things like friendships with like-minded people, or if people from your family, from your environment. If someone there is also depressed, then you can't just leave them hanging by getting healthy. It feels like edgy-badgy, you're sitting alone in our shared boat. That doesn't work. And out of solidarity, you stay there. Or something like, yes, basically it's about fear of change. That's actually the most important secondary gain, that everything stays just as nice as you know it. So the familiar gives a sense of security. That's just an apparent security. It's not secure at all. But it feels secure because you have the feeling you can oversee or control it a little better. And that's exactly the point. We need to learn to let go of control. We cannot control life. Everyone wants to somehow control life because otherwise it triggers fears. But we need to move away from that. So, I recently read such a nice saying. The best way to determine your life in advance is to shape it yourself. And to learn to become a conscious creator. And that also includes letting go of control. Letting go and learning to trust. That is one of our most important tasks in dealing with depression. So the fear of change is innate. That's completely normal. So please don't judge yourself, blame yourself, or anything like that. And now it's simply our job to get out of it and just see, okay, I'm going slowly. I'm going through it slowly. I am now ready to change gradually. So that my sabotage monster comes along or that my survival mechanism is very slowly ready to go along with it. It only goes slowly, but it goes. So, be secondary gains when you become aware of them. You can work on them. Awareness is always the first most important step, followed by gratitude and love. And not necessarily one after the other, but also all three together. That you are grateful for trigger situations and that you are loving with yourself to resolve it. And then, the healing flow starts again. Then you stop blocking yourself. One thing is very important for me to say at the end. Resistances do not have to be resolved before you can take the next step. So be careful not to develop a new belief from this. Only when I have resolved all my resistances, only then can I take the next step towards healing. That's not how it is. It's the other way around. You look at the resistance, become aware of it, accept it, and then you take the next step anyway. And, through that, it dissolves. It doesn't dissolve before the step, but by taking the step. So just as a little reminder, resistances are not something evil that must be eliminated, removed, or dissolved. They dissolve on their own as a nice side effect when you simply look at them and accept them. And then you go through it anyway, despite the resistance. These are the little comfort zone moments where you decide to do it differently this time and no longer cling to your belief. It doesn't work because. When you become aware of your self-sabotage for the first time and say, no, now I'm doing it differently, now I'm doing it anyway. And I no longer listen to that monster in my head. I'm doing it anyway, even if it's difficult for me. These are crucial milestones on your path to healing. And then things start to move forward. Then you're no longer stuck. Okay, that was once again a very, very long video with 10 lengthy points. But I hope it helped you a little. Feel free to write in the comments which point was the most important for you, where you might have already had experiences overcoming this point or doing it differently. Feel free to share your success stories with each other. I always offer this, even on my website. Or if you feel like you've already taken a huge step, maybe you'd like to do an interview with me. You don't have to be perfectly healthy for that, just have valuable experiences that you'd like to share with others. Then feel free to contact me. If you'd like to work with me, feel free to visit my website www.selenklopfen.den. Book an appointment for a coaching session, and then we'll see if I can help you. And now, take care, my dears. Bye.